Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second in our series of lessons on the Restoration, this really odd time period in English history. So, it's a depth study that we're looking at, and it's a time when England really changes. And if you remember last lesson, we were looking at an overview of what led up to it. So, lesson two, the title is Why Did England Want a King Back? And we can see from the dates there, 1649 to 1660, we didn't have a king in this country for 11 years. So within that really short space of time, that sort of decade, we go from hating kings, wanting to be rid of the king, killing poor Charles I, cutting his head off, to 11 years later going up to his son and being like, hey, fancy being our king, which must have been such an awkward conversation. So we're going to look at this lesson, what happened in those 11 years that took us from one extreme, we hate kings, to actually restoring or bringing them back. And remember, it's that restoring or bringing back that gives the name to the time period, the Restoration, restoring the king. So just remind yourself on what we learnt last lesson. You can pause the video if you want to. So if you remember, we were looking at the fellow in the top left corner, that's Charles I of England. So terrible king, God bless him, really awful at the job, ends up causing the English Civil War. So a war within England between king and the parliament about who should have power, what religion should be like. And you can see there on the right of the screen, that is Charles I being executed. So Charles I loses the war. Parliament decide that they are going to execute him and they are going to rule without him. And then down the bottom of that family tree, we can see Charles I's son, Charles II. So it's kind of annoying they've got the same name, that the younger son, the son is named after the father. In the exam, be really careful that you're not saying King Charles. You've got to put one or two after the name to flag up to the examiner which one they're talking about, because we've had three King Charleses in history. Charles I, Charles II, both appearing on this course. So we left Charles II. He was hanging out in France with his cousin Louis XIV, learning some interesting ideas about kingship over there. We're going to look at what's going on after this. So it splits into two sections. So the first 4 years, 1649 to 1653, we have what's called the Commonwealth. So there's a government that is ruling, kind of similar to what we have today. So MPs, we don't have a prime minister, we're not quite there yet, but groups of MPs who've been elected, they've been voted in, and together they're sitting and making decisions about running the country. And they find that quite difficult. And what we get from 1653 is one of the MPs, Oliver Cromwell, takes over. So Oliver Cromwell, really important figure in the English Civil War. He fought for Parliament. He was one of its most important generals. So he does wonderful things for the Parliament army in the Civil War. And he takes over for those last 7 years. Oliver Cromwell forms what's called a protectorate. Don't worry, there's lots of new words in this bit of the topic, but I will go through them. So there he is. There's a picture of Oliver Cromwell. So for 7 years, he is ruling. In 1657, he gets rid of Parliament. So 1657, he says to Parliament, thank you very much. I don't need your advice. Go home. Which is kind of crazy when you consider one of the reasons the English Civil War happened is the king was ruling without Parliament. So Charles I dismisses Parliament and says, thank you for your advice. I don't need you. And that was one of the things that causes the Civil War. So Cromwell is now ruling as Lord Protector, which is basically a king. So he's doing the role of a king. He's not getting advice from Parliament. He's not listening to them. But he's not called a king. He's called the Lord Protector, the protector of the country, which is where we get the protectorate from. So England's a protector, Lord Protector. So Oliver Cromwell has basically become King of England, but we're not calling him king, we're calling him Lord Protector, as if that makes a difference. So England tries very hard to have lots of different opinions, lots of MPs ruling, not having one man in charge. But you can see very quickly that role of man in charge gets filled by Cromwell. So there's lots of interesting things. If you get a chance, go and do some research on Oliver Cromwell and the things that he does in his rule. It's not for the course. You don't need to know it for the course, but it is a really interesting thing to study. One thing we do need to know about the time of the Protectorate is what's going on with religion. And the people who are very powerful at this time are the Puritans. They are going to come up in the course time and time again, so we need to know them. So they are extreme Protestants, so they are as far from Catholic as you can get. And the picture on the left is just such a typical Puritan family. So they are very serious. They are highly religious. Clothes, they're showing their hands, they're showing their faces, but everything's very high neck. Women are expected to cover their hair. So you can see the lady there is wearing a cap. And you can see as well their clothes black with bits of white. So very, very plain clothes. You can see on the children there, the little boys dressed in brown. So we're not at this point doing anything bright, anything colourful, anything fun, which is fine if that's your thing. But the problem England had at the time is the Puritans were putting their beliefs on everyone else. So they're people who weren't Puritan, but were expected to behave in this way. So famously, they banned football, they didn't like dancing, they didn't like singing, they didn't like walking, going for a walk, a little family walk, unless it was to church. Their idea is you're not on earth to have fun. You're on earth to worship God. And then when you die, you go to heaven, you'll get your reward afterwards. And I did put up for you there on the right, the public notice. One thing they famously did, they banned Christmas. The Puritans were like, no more Christmas. You can see their word forbidden. The observation or celebrating of Christmas having been deemed a sacrilege, exchanging of gifts and greetings is forbidden. So saying to someone happy Christmas, that's not allowed. Dressing in fine clothing, so fancy clothing, feasting and similar satanical practices. Satanical, Satan, devil practices is what they're so all of the gift giving when you're at Christmas you're offering around the mince pies according to the Puritans that is devil worship, devil practices. Who knew? So the Puritans are not messing around with religion. Wishing someone happy Christmas not allowed. And the problem they have is most of the country are Protestant. They're not Puritans. They don't like it. You don't want to celebrate Christmas, that's your business, but don't tell me I can't celebrate it, is that attitude. So it's causing lots of angst in England at this time. So Cromwell dies in 1658, and if you wanted proof that he was a king, his eldest son takes over, and you can see a picture of him there. So Oliver Cromwell dies, excuse me. His oldest son, who's alive at the time, Richard Cromwell, comes in. And he, bless him, is not suited for the role at all. He's really ineffective. He does a terrible job. And very quickly, people pull him to one side and are like, Richard, big fan of you, big fan of your dad, but this isn't working and you need to resign. So what this causes is a real power vacuum. England, remember, is looking for this one man to fill the role, to take charge, and they're not getting it. The British Army take over in power. And you've also got the Parliament that comes back. It's a different Parliament from the first one. It's called the Long Parliament, so different group of MPs. The army don't like the MPs don't like the army, so they're constantly arguing. Meanwhile, all the people in England are like, what is going on? It's just been such a mess. We've lost Cromwell, we've lost the king, we've lost Christmas. We just want someone to take over and do a good job of ruling, which paves the way for Charles II. So Charles the first son, Charles II, highly intelligent man, and also highly intelligent advisors who say now is the time to just suggest yourself as king. So it's called the Declaration of Breda. Breda is a town in the Netherlands. So Charles, this is like his sort of pick me moment. This is Charles II going, hey guys, you need a strong leader. I'm right here. I think I'd be awesome. So on the advice of his advisors, he moves from Catholic Spain to the Protestant Netherlands. So partly for religion, so he's gone to a Protestant country. He's trying to offer himself to the country as a good Protestant, not associating himself with the Catholics, but also geographically. So he's a lot closer to England in the Netherlands. And he comes up with like a list of promises of what he would do if you make him king that's designed to appeal to a wide range of people. And we will look in more detail about what he promises next lesson.